Good morning and welcome to our webinar, Service Management, Quoting and Billing Best Practices. Our presentation will last about 45 minutes, and if you have questions during the presentation, you can ask those in the chat or question box in the GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll have time at the end for Q&A. EquipIQ is a world-class equipment management software solution that equips you to take your business to the next level through sales revenue growth, enterprise-wide visibility, and intelligent insights. We are excited to talk to you today about service management, quoting, and billing best practices. Our first presenter today is Chris Arend, Director of Sales. And Chris, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate all the help that you always provide us to get to where we are. Couldn't do it without you. So thanks, everybody, for joining us. Service management, quoting, billing, best practices. For us, best practices is something that clearly is never ending. But maybe before we jump into more of the content, let's talk about maybe what's possibly at stake. Maybe what questions are you asking yourself this morning? If nothing changes today in terms of the way you do things, does it really matter? Some of us ask that question, and some of us need to also know the actual value of the change before we can actually answer that question of whether or not it really matters. And we believe that we need to be asking ourselves some of those kind of critical questions. Maybe you're here because we need to win more quotes, right? So we're talking about best practices of quotes and billing. Maybe that's one of the reasons why you're here. Winning just one more deal, one more service quote, what does that really mean to you? It really does start with just one quote that you win. It's not just about focusing on one. You want to look at the bigger picture, but at the end of the day, we can't dismiss the value of what it takes and what it would really add to my business if I just won one more. If I knew what the real cost was to my business by adding just one, I might look at the bigger picture of what can I do in order to increase my quotes, and maybe spend a little bit more time, looking at it. Do I know even the quotes that I want to win? Maybe some quotes I don't want to win. Maybe I need to know that. So when I look at what's at stake, we're also covering why you win, maybe, and why you lose. How much effort does it really take in order to get these invoices out? Have you ever counted the effort that it takes? That maybe the amount of time that it takes, maybe the number of people that touch it, and then maybe the next question is, well, how much effort does it really take to get invoices out correctly? How long should it take? And what has to go right in order to make sure it's accurate? We know that those are real questions that need to be asked, and if you're asking, these kind of questions, I think you're at the right the webinar. So continuous improvement, is it just a clever phrase? Buzzwords like continuous improvement, they really are just buzzwords, unless there's a plan to measure, the value that comes from it. So I think that's one of the bigger reasons why you hear cliches or maybe even fads of what to focus on, like continuous improvement, because we've failed to recognize the real value that what you might be getting from it. It's not improvement for improvement's sake. It's improvement for profitability's sake, and sometimes I think we miss that. And then, when you think of best practices, do you think of them for others, or do you think of them about you? What I mean by that is, if you're thinking about people you wish were on this webcast right now listening to this, I challenge you to look maybe inward, right? I think we're all pretty guilty of when we hear something really good, we want to share it with others. We wish somebody else was joining us. But at the end of the day, we really can only control what we're in charge of. And since since that's what we're here today, let's all together kind of focus on what that might look like. All right, so here's the agenda. We want to give you some context first in terms of Steve Christensen and I, where we come from, why we wake up every day so passionate about helping companies make these improvements to their business. Next, we'll go over the main building blocks of what good quoting and billing really have in place. Next, we'll describe what we mean by what the messy middle is, and then we'll highlight the barriers to accomplish these improvements and maybe this focus. And then we'll also turn to some real-world demo of really what to expect out of that. So after we go through some of those, we'll have a chance to get into some software the way maybe Equip IQ, which is the lens that we look through, and that way you'll have a chance to maybe see an example of what that might look like. So let's give you some context. Equip IQ, this is the lens that Steve and I look at. Truly this is a next generation software package. It's not just marketing, overselling themselves. It truly is a next generation software. And it's designed for companies that could be, have all the complexities of a full dealer, or they may just do rental only. Maybe they just do service only. But regardless, the software is designed to be able to help companies who really fall into those main areas. This isn't something that just got created. It's been a long, methodical process, 6+ years in the making, running in obviously a lot of locations. It's built for the enterprise grade, type of expectation. So what we mean by that is it's got a strong focus on reducing the keystrokes, being proficient or rather efficient in terms of how we do things, whether it be reducing error rates, or maybe even just the complexity of it is what it takes to train and create some automation where that makes sense. We're not done, and we're not going to rest on our success that we've had. We're still growing it, and we know that there's more things that we can always try to work on and improve upon, and we do this shoulder to shoulder with our customers. It's built uniquely on a software package called J.D. Edwards Enterprise One. And so we use a tool set within that product in order to extend that functionality and be able to provide a world-class solution. So what is J.D. Edwards Enterprise One? There's probably people on the line who probably don't have any frame of reference to what that is. What you probably should know is it's the #1 mid-sized ERP solution in the world. It's designed for companies who expect flexibility. They expect the ability to have configuration options, not customization options, to solve every problem. It's got a huge budget for R&D, and I think that's part of what we get to take advantage of, and all of our customers benefit from, is knowing that there's so much being invested in a product like this, where we get to focus on business processes, and we don't have to necessarily focus on the technology to keep up with the latest and greatest technology, which what we have found from the marketplace is really lacking. Most software packages that we're hearing out there, they're just based on legacy type of functionality and technology. So anyway, that's a little more about Enterprise One and what that is. Here are the 6 main modules that we offer. I'll start and kind of give you a quick detail on a few of these. Equipment purchasing sales, what really that is that if you're selling equipment, not just renting or servicing it, you need to have the ability to make sure you don't get upside down in all of the variables that go into selling a new piece of equipment. It could be complexity of flooring, financing programs, it could be trade-ins, it could be lots of different variables that are going into that are affecting the price and what you're settling on, and maybe what the customer owes and what they don't, what incentives are available. And having a solution that's designed to do that simply and making sure that the salesperson doesn't get themselves into a bind. Specialty use equipment would be an example where somebody is taking a particular base unit and then they're extending it above and beyond using maybe a configurator, or maybe some sort of, they're manufacturing it a little bit beyond, or they're maybe adding value, sometimes we refer to it, beyond maybe just the way you might order it from the OEM or the way it's generally manufactured. So you need some flexibility, and we refer to that as specialty use equipment. Third would be, obviously, equipment rental, having a world-class rental solution. We're obviously going to talk a little bit about service as well, and some quoting that goes along all of these different topics. And then you've got parts purchasing. So clearly, we know that in the world of assets and high-value assets, it's not just about selling equipment, and selling these assets to people, but it's also renting, servicing, and also servicing through parts, whether it be part sales, replacement parts, or whether those are going to be coming through the service department. And then lastly, we have extended financials. Extended financials are really what you would expect from an enterprise-grade solution. It's how do we become more efficient, more effective to close the books, to be able to do things without having to touch them as many times. It's what you would expect from an enterprise-grade type of solution. So let's go through quoting building blocks here. So let's start with the first one, which is, customers, they don't want to wait, and employees don't want to tinker, right? They expect quickness and speed. So they're looking for how quickly can I do this? And both the customer and the employee expect that. The next is related to knowing that the dates that you are giving your customer matter. And whether you would like it or not, they become your reputation. Either way, good or bad, right? What you provide these dates, they start to define you as a company in your customers and prospects' eyes. And that is going to either help you or hurt you in the end. It's not something that you fix either, right? It's hard to overcome and change some of those perceptions from a customer. The next one is accurate estimates. We believe building block of good quoting is you need to be as close as possible with what you know in terms of an accurate estimate to your customer. I think that only builds trust as well. Every quote that you ever give a customer needs to have a plan after you've shared it with that customer. Every one, right? You got to have a plan of what that might look like, and you may have a plan that's a little bit different depending upon the type of quote or the scenario or what you're quoting. But at the end of the day, it's important to know that you need to have a follow-up plan. Conversions. You need to clearly have effective conversion ratios. Doing lots of quotes actually doesn't mean that you're going to win more quotes. So you have to think about what's going into your quotes to make sure that from a conversion standpoint that you know what is leading towards good practices to convert customers to say, yes, I like your quote, and move forward. And what are those things? And being professionals at that conversion ratio. And then the last on this slide for best practice for quoting is really related to measuring, right? Metrics and trends, and then knowing what it is you're going to do about that. Those are going to be important. So let's go to the building blocks for billing. This for billing, you're going to end up realizing that nothing will fill up your customers than inaccurate invoices. So you make sure they're accurate. It shows that they care, that you care, that it matters to them for you to be able to provide accurate invoices. And we know that that's not easy to do. But what accurate invoices clearly show is that your customers are trusting you, that when they get an invoice from you, that they can believe it. And trust is hard to fix if they're not accurate. Clear and transparent. That's again, it needs to be something that you can understand easily. So when you read it, that things they flow correctly, that they're in the right place. It's not just information that's just shared because you were forced to share it, but you've got things in a place that's readable, and it makes sense based upon what was done and to what was done. The type of maybe service work order that you did, or the type of activity, the job, the cost type, those kind of things all need to go to be able to provide some clear and transparency, and that also improves your trust. Need to be fast to send, it's fast to collect, right? Sitting on invoices really does hurt cash flow, and it does add up quickly. So you want to make sure that you're working on timely invoices. Customer-centric, what we mean by that is you need to be able to provide invoices the way a customer expects them or wants them. Whether you're working with a government agency, whether or not you're working with a customer, small and big, they all have some different expectations from you. And you need some flexibility to easily be able to do that without it being a burden of extra work that it takes for you to be able to provide that flexibility to your customer. Because if it's hard, you're likely not going to offer that flexibility, and it's just, I think you're leaving some customer satisfaction on the table. So I think we can all say, okay, it sounds all easy. Tell me something maybe I don't know. I like to, maybe lead with some Captain Obvious, right? I mean, he, clearly, Captain Obvious, type of bullet points maybe we've had, but really, are they? I believe that for us to be able to do what we've shown, even though that maybe we've even seen some of those topics before, and we may know in our heart that those are things we need to focus on, I think it's fair to say that the devil's in the details with those things. It's sometimes easier said than done. And sometimes it's because we have to believe in that it'll help. Sometimes we just have to understand. Or maybe the people at our company have to understand. Or maybe they have to believe because I told them to believe. Or they have to understand because they feel like they need to understand, but they just really don't understand from a company-wide and what the benefit is to the business. And we see that a lot. So at the end of the day, maybe it's not that easy. Maybe not everyone understands why it matters and what the expectations are for that. So if it's maybe not that easy, maybe it's because of the next topic. The next topic we refer to as the messy middle. This messy middle is, it's what we know is in business, it's all about people. But we also know it's all about processes. So whether or not you're scheduling the right technicians to the right service work orders, or you're talking about training technicians and the approvers of how to document things properly and what looks good, it is about the people, right? I mean, if you don't have people who care, you don't have people who buy in, it's really hard to conduct business. We've all been around those scenarios, the good and the bad. You can't strip away the people to the success of being able to navigate what we refer to this messy middle. But processes obviously as well. I mean, let's talk about standards, right? Do you have formal standards? Do you have a formal standards review process? Do you actually know what you do, when you do it, when you go to update maybe some of these standards? How often you update your criteria sometimes matters. So what about approvals? How often are you updating your approvals process? I think it's fair to say that some people, depending upon how new they are to the company, you may need some tweaking of your approvals because of maybe could be workload, could be seasonal, right? During certain seasons, I need to add a little bit of additional approvals, or have a couple people be able to do approvals because the sheer numbers of them. Looking at your process for approvals is going to really help. But it also is about making sure that that you're minimizing, you're routinely looking to minimize these errors. Are you creating a process in place that you're looking for errors and then you're diving in to try to figure out what you can do to prevent from it. When you get busy, man, it's really difficult to be proactive. But that proactive looking for how do we reduce errors goes a long way. So it's easy to see to why that some of these fall into that messy middle. So this next slide that I have here is clearly, I would say everyone likes sausage, but who really likes watching it made? Most people, aren't really excited about how the sausage is made. They just want to focus on that sausage on the plate, and that's what you want to focus on. And we focus on that because it's easier, but you can't ignore what it took in order to get that on the plate. Same thing with these best practices. That messy middle, to me, it's the making of the sausage that no one really wants to talk about, and we'd rather kick the can down the road or focus on something else because I can make myself be busy, or I can tell myself that maybe it's not as important, as it should be. So hopefully today we're kind of alluding to maybe taking and pausing and realizing what in order to do better with this. So some more of those things that fall into that messy middle. Documentation, right? And we all know how hard it is to do it well. It takes constant focus. What formal processes do you have in place to address this? How easy is it to access the details about equipment, or how easy is it to get to information related to repair history? What are you doing in order to make sure that all that information is clear and easy to get to? But also, how easy is it to adjust things? What's billed to the customer in terms of time and cost? What about my actuals? What if my technicians make a mistake? How easy is it, flexible is it to adjust that? Is that hard to do? But what about notes, internal, external notes, and how do I make adjustments or deal with mistakes that were made? We're going to continue to talk through some of those, especially when we get into some of the examples from a software demonstration standpoint. So there's some more messy middle, right? There's parts availability and optimization, right? You got to make sure you got good inventory levels. You got to make sure that you've got things available, but you don't want to have too much, right? So are we spending enough time looking at the optimization? Are we updating our labor standards? And how often do we update these labor standards? And how do you determine whether or not you should or shouldn't? What about your parts pricing? How often do you do price increases? How often do you tweak and what that looks like? Do you have a process that you know that during certain seasons, this is when you go do that, or not? Or is it just based upon, hey, it feels like we need to do something, maybe we should do it? Or maybe we should have some sort of formal process. Well, what about maintaining that approval process? We gave the example earlier, maybe something seasonal, but what about somebody who's brand new? You can't possibly expect them to maybe get all of the approvals correctly, so maybe you want to add them to a mix to where you have some additional approvals just to make sure another set of eyes until you feel comfortable that they're getting it. Executing that quote follow-up plan. Well, it's one of the building blocks that we talked about. It's real simple to send a quote out sometimes without having a plan. And if everybody's got a plan and they know what to do, based on the type of quote that was put out, we're going to make sure we go out there and execute. The AR exception process. Do you allow exceptions? And if you do, how do you make sure that process is followed? And do you make exceptions? What are the exceptions? And how do you handle that? Do you have those formally documented? The other thing that we've also seen is estimators get busy, right? There are certain times of the year. Do you have a system that was designed for speed and quickness for them to be able to do what they need to do, to make sure they do it thoroughly and they don't cut corners just to get it out? But do you have a system that's designed for speed? We're going to show you an example of maybe what speed might look like, in the software a little bit later. But we've got to make sure we're always helping our estimators be available. There's nothing worse when an estimator's not available and we couldn't get a quote out to a customer. We couldn't bid on more business because we were too busy. We need to make sure we're always trying to free up the estimators because that's real opportunity at the top of that possible, sales funnel for winning more quotes and more orders. And then, I would say that, training is about as important as you can get. So you got to train, and you got to do some more training, and then you got to do some more training. And, a colleague and friend of mine named Mike Gibson tells a story that I love when he's helping customers go live. That he basically explains to them is that once they've trained on it, and they've trained on it some more, and they finally say, I can't possibly be trained anymore, he said, perfect. That's the way we want it. Now go do some more training. And we laugh about it, but you can never really have too much training. And so that's we believe in making sure that training is really important to everything. So what prevents us from really having this success or putting these best practices in place? I really believe that cliche of good being the enemy of the great is real. Because if good enough is paying the bills, or good enough is allowing us not to feel a lot of pain, we leave money on the table of maybe what we could do better. And then we also clearly have that what I refer to as the tyranny of the urgent. It's that short-term focused mentality. It's the, I got to get this out. I got to go do this. And you always feel like you're on this hamster wheel of trying to get on top of everything. And that's a clear barrier to success of putting best practices in place. But we also know change management's hard. It's not easy, but you have to make it so. We mentioned the training, but getting the buy-in really is what if you don't get people to have the right training, but they also don't have the buy-in, they may go through the motions for training, or they may go through the motions to do things, and they may hide behind, well, that's not my job description, right? So that's where you find the silo thinking. And that silo thinking is so dangerous to a business because it's it's kind of an us versus them mentality, and you got to get that out of your organization, right? Because that silo thinking creates real bitterness that creates this who's on my team and who's not on my team, that ends up creating bigger problems. And ultimately, it's the customer who usually is the one who suffers because of the ramifications of that type of thinking. And obviously, the company suffers from a profitability standpoint. So let's talk about catalysts, because those are barriers. But what are the things that maybe spur us to go to do some of these best practices? Well, you have some sort of major system failure, whether it be software or process, or something happens, that something terrible goes on that realizes that you don't have any other choice, but you got to fix this. You may have a major business event. You may decide that, we're going to expand the store. We see or location, or we add a new branch. You see an area, a market that's underserved, and you want to expand. Or maybe it's we're not going to organically grow. We're actually going to go through acquisition and grow that way. We see that all the time out there in this marketplace as well. But sometimes it's just ownership transition. It could be even just generation to generation transition. It could be a true family to another family type of transition, or a business to a business type of transition that has to happen. We often see that business event being there. And sometimes it's the decision to the implementation of new software. You see a lot of the times, and at least that's what we always try to look for and try to help and consult with our customers is, what does this afford you to do at this particular time? And often it's working on some of those best practices. But we also sometimes have to make these changes to best practices because of an economy shift. Maybe we have to think about a part of our business that's gone away, or part of our business that's really down, and we need to make more focus and emphasis on another area, or maybe we need to go into a different area that maybe we haven't done that. That's the beauty of the United States spirit, right? It's adaptability and looking at it, whether we look back to our Industrial Revolution days to now how we become a service-oriented type of society. You have to constantly be looking for what do you do based upon the economy shift, and part of that business adaptation. So I personally believe that you don't want to do anything that we're talking about today without being based on an outcome. And to me, it's you do these things because you're going to get better repeat customers, and you're going to have, it's going to increase your future revenue. That's top line revenue, right? So we're also talking about, that from a profitability standpoint, it's how do we improve that top line? Or maybe it's just decreasing costs. But at the end of the day, both will lead to profitability. But do you know by how much, right? And those are the kind of things that sometimes we have this instinct that says, we think, but we want to get to I know, that this, by doing this is what's going to happen, because you've actually spent some time to make sure it's not a loss leader of time that you're going to go chase without, the benefits of it. Employee satisfaction, what we have seen is that if you've defined plans in terms of what your processes are and what your expectations are, that really does improve your employee satisfaction and, the company pride. And just by having a plan in place. We believe that timely AR collection actually matter. That really everybody, just like everybody's in sales, everyone's also in collections. Everything we do makes it easier to do both. And what's the cost of making these errors? And does it lead to sticky customers? And does it increase my share of wallet? We're going to move to some real-world examples. Okay, so Steve Christensen is going to provide you some examples with a software standpoint. And here are some of the things that we're going to review. So first, we'll go out there, look at create a quote service, a work order. We'll maybe talk a little bit about the kind of the follow-up and maybe what WatchList can help with in terms of that follow-up plan. We're going to talk a little bit about the people side, the assigning resources, and the ease to do that, to make sure that we do that correctly. We'll add some parts, we'll add some time and notes, and then we have to talk about what really happens in most companies, right? It's now I've got to make some adjustments, or maybe I need to review and approve, and then we'll talk through just from from an invoice standpoint what that might look like, and go from there. So we'll ask Steve Christensen to maybe pull up his screen and enter, and just show us maybe kind of where you begin for entering a quote screen and what this looks like. And one thing to note is that we're clearly not trying to show you Equip IQ in its entirety, other than we're trying to show you some examples of maybe what to expect and what that might look like. So we're going to not go into a huge background of navigation within the software. We're just going to show you maybe some examples and kind of talk through that and have a little dialogue through it, and so give you an example of what you might be able to accomplish. All right?
Very good. Can you hear me, Chris?
Yes.
Okay, good. So yeah, I'm going to go through. The first thing I'm going to do is create a quote, and like Chris said, I can spend a lot of time on one screen, so I'm going to kind of move kind of quickly. So if you do have questions, we'll get to those. Customer number, we need to know the customer. There's also a search. You can go search for customer name. I have 3 buttons: create service order, create model, create quote. I just want to say I'm not going to create a model at this time, but the difference between a model work order and a quote work order is a quote is what I consider a one-time use. Usually you do that specifically for a customer and a unit and what you're going to do at that time. A model work order is more like, if I would have had this back in my earlier days, I would have used this. We have certain models of tractors that the power takeoff, it used the same parts, took the same amount of labor to do the job. I would have created a model work order for that, put my part numbers on there, and I could have just copied that model work order into every customer situation that came in. A big time saver. But for now, I'm just going to create a quote. I'm going to pick my unit. Say I'm going to work on this dozer. Real quick function here is that I can create a work order in different branches. So if you're a multi-branch business and you got kind of a corporate service manager that's maybe over a couple different locations, this is a time saver right here. He can create a work order in either division. That's just an error just saying that I do have open work orders already. I'm going to ignore that. Why are we doing the repair, or why are we doing this quote? Typically, in my history, I guess a lot of times we'll do an inspection on a unit. We'll come back with a quote for the repairs. So that's what I'm going to do. This rate type, just real quick, is our labor rate. Are we doing it in the shop? Field typically is a higher rate, and that's all very customizable. Replace alternator. The only other thing I need, how long do I think it's going to take? I think it's probably going to take an hour and a half. If I drop down, you'll see that I got planned dollars based on my shop labor rate. We're going to do another section. Engine oil and filter. I'm going to say 3 hours. It's a pretty tough job. Nice thing about EquipIQ is I can do different types of work. Here I'm going to make a warranty work. And I'll probably spend a couple hours doing that. Now just keep in mind this is all estimated time. It has nothing to do with real time when we get into that. So once I got my work orders created, I want to go in and I want to estimate some parts. There's my part on my alternator. I go to my next work order. Here I'm going to show you a nice function that I can go pull in a parts list that when it is connected in your business system will come out of your online parts catalog. So here I got an oil change one. As quick as that, there's my parts. I dropped them in and they're on there. Another you can enter part numbers, manually and come up with the same thing. So there's a lot of nice, functionality. It's built for speed. It really is. If you have the parts list built out, it's all right there. So I do want to show you that, this is our total bill, $848. But 241 of it is warranty work. Customer's not going to get billed for that. So what I would do, sitting in the chair, is I would print this quote, but I wouldn't print the warranty work. I'm just going to print what the customer wants to see. So I want to write that number down. Okay, so then you would take and you would send that off to the customer. I just wanted to show you real quick. Here's the quote. It looks professional. It looks like an invoice, but it's not. It says service quote right on it. Here's his total bill for his part of the work, and here's the detail. It's got the part numbers on there. It's how much labor we're going to charge him. It even includes shop supplies. Really nice, professional looking. Because if I'm a customer, I want to see it on paper, and I'm sure your customers do too.
So you probably saw throughout, when Steve was showing you that screen, granted he's moving fast, right, and you're not familiar with that screen, but I think you still get the sense that, wow, he can still move pretty quickly from service order to service order. You can have, some people refer to them as segments, right? You have different ways of looking at it, but what is it that you're doing with that customer and what needs to be tracked separately. How quickly can you do that? How easily is it to add parts? How easy is it for me to copy something I've already done similar that has maybe a bunch of line items, and how quickly can I get that into a new quote? Those are all the types of flexibility and the speed in which you're trying to look for. One of the things you probably didn't see on that screen was there was you have the ability to also look at like promise dates and look at maybe trying to figure out, okay, now that I got that quote and I've sent it to them, like you saw that example. So Steve has sent this out to him, but now, as a plan to follow my follow-up plan for all quotes that go out, maybe I need to look at a way to figure out how many quotes are open that I need to go follow up with, at what particular criteria. And you don't have to take like our example. You can really come up with your own, and that's the powerful piece of an enterprise-grade solution like EquipIQ, is that we're trying to provide you, the customer, your own idea of what your follow-up plan is, and then provide it and implement and go execute it. So Steve, why don't you show them an example of how you can use something like watch lists?
Right. Very, very easy. From any screen in EquipIQ, this is a watch list. If I click on this, here's my watch list that I have made. Oh, quotes due. I got 3 of them due. That's how easy it is to come in there and look. And you can set them up different ways. You can see the start date. The field isn't named correctly, but here's the ones that I created on 8/23, and they're due on 8/25. Here's one on 8/16. It's due on 8/30. I put a due date so it reminds me that, hey, I got to contact this customer. I gave him this quote a couple days ago, and I need to follow up because I need to keep my shop busy, and I need this work. Real quick way of doing that, and like Chris says, you can set up this any way that you want for how many days you want to look at. So, but it's a one quick deal. There's other watch lists that I do have set up for approvals. But I think, Chris, we should probably copy a work order real quick before I get into that.
Yeah, let's do that.
So I want to go back to this customer. This customer called back and said, you know what, that quote that you gave me, it sounds like a really good deal. So this time I'm going to create a regular work order. Pick my unit. And I'm going to show you a real nice function that I wish I would have had. Back in the day. This mass work order copy. Remember that I had 3 separate work orders on that service order? So what this is going to do in a matter of a couple clicks, it's going to create all those work orders for me. There's my service order. I select it. There's all 3 of my work orders. You can copy one or you can copy them all. I'm going to copy them all. I'm going to copy it to my new service order. Look at this. There they are. That's how quick it is. And now from here, I'm going to jump right into, scheduling and assigning. Who do we want to work on this? Here's a list of all my technicians. You can kind of grade them here. You'll see some, what they're good at. Most of the time, you guys know. So let's take this guy. I can either assign him to all or say, oh, you know what? I don't want him on that oil change. I'm going to remove him off of that one. I can take another guy. I can assign him to that one. And what's the importance of this? The importance is when they go, and you're going to see in a second, when I go to the time clock, this 05 guy is not going to see this change oil work order. That's the the security around it and the ease for technicians. They're only going to see the work that they're assigned to.
And this is part of the making of the sausage, right? It's the, how do you make sure the right technician, you make sure the right technicians are working on the right orders. You want to make sure that you're not putting them up, setting them up for failure, or you want to set them up for success. And how do you do that, properly? Whether or not they're more efficient, they're more effective, or who's available, making sure you don't just say, well, I always give it to Jimmy. Well, Jimmy's got a bunch of stuff. How about you give it, to somebody else? And having the visibility to do that, simply. So it all flows downhill to make sure that that things are done with best practices in mind.
Very good point. I'm going to jump right into the time clock. Just show you how easy it is for a technician. I mean, they come in here. I already clocked this guy in at 6 o'clock this morning, so I have some time. They come in, they hit clock out because they're clocking out against the work order. This is their list of work orders. They have to pick one of these. This is the replace alternator one, and here's the warranty work. So let's just say that, oh, you know what? I did the warranty work here. I got 5.77 hours. We do force them to put in a time note, and the reason for that is that EquipIQ is really, I want to say, great for auditing. We don't allow them to change original time punches, and we don't allow them to change original internal notes. The business reason why we do this is because the last place that I worked at, we actually had this EquipIQ audited by a major vendor, and they okayed it that we didn't have to give them paper for warranty. We just kept everything in the system. As long as the technicians typed a good note, they accepted it as a paperless system. Talk about time saving. And normally they would type a whole lot better than what I just did.
We need to give you some more training then, Steve.
Yes, I'm getting rusty. So I'm going to go to the next tech. And you'll notice that the only one that he sees is this change engine oil and filters, because that's the only one that I assigned him to. He doesn't see the other two. Okay, and say I'm done. Now I'm going back into my work order. I'm just going to refresh my screen since I was already on there. Oh, the tech screwed up and didn't punch off on this first work order. How are we going to fix that, right? This is what's nice about that. Go into my warranty work order, jump into my labor. Oh, he punched all his time on this labor. I just can't put all that time on that labor job. You know what? I'm going to move 3 hours. What work order am I going to move it to? I'm going to move it to that alternator one. Look at that. I moved his actual hours and his billable hours. I'm just going to jump over to that work order, and there's my 3 hours. It moved the actual time punch. So we don't change time punches. We can move them. The other thing that I can do is say, you know what, this guy 4 hours. He did a really good job. I'm going to bump that up a little bit. Having the flexibility
of how to make these adjustments, because we all know that mistakes are going to happen, or adjustments need to be made. That's just the nature of the business, and how quickly and easy it is to be done. To us, that's important. That's how we created EquipIQ for that purpose, to be able to make that simple and easy for you to do that. For time's sake, Steve, I'm thinking maybe we just show them a quick kind of approval flow, just making sure that you created some sort of process in place for approvals, and maybe how quickly that can be done, and then we'll jump to invoicing, and then we'll open it up for some questions.
Okay, so it's just quick on the watch list. They could set these up for a service manager approval. One click. These are all the work orders that are ready for his approval. All he has to do is jump in here, look at the ones that are ready to approve. Service Manager button, he just approved them. They went to another status, means they're ready for Parts Manager. Now, he would go and look at time and adjust time and do all that before he did his approval. Parts Manager, he jumps at his, he looks, oh, I got one here. Oh, there's them ones that I just looked at. He would go check the parts and do his approval. All of a sudden they go to invoice ready. And whoever does your invoicing can have the same watch list. So they jump in there. Oh, I have a bunch ready here to be invoiced, and they would go in here and do the invoicing. So I mean, that's how easy it is. There's an electronic trail of every approval, who did it, what time they did it, what day they did it. Very good for audit purposes.
So part of our best practices that we discussed was talking about making sure that you have the ability to have some flexibility in making these adjustments to what your customer's specific needs are, that customer-centric type of mentality. Where we often see that is, as we mentioned, a customer may have how they want to be billed, how they want to be invoiced, and making sure that you do that. Let's pull up an invoice, Steve, that kind of shows you an example of what would go out to a customer and to show some of that flexibility.
Okay. Here I did an invoice earlier where I combined 2 customer work orders along with a warranty work order. So what the customer will see is his part of the bill. Shows the unit on there. It shows I call it a summary page because it shows, okay, I owe $1,268. It went to his open AR. Where's the detail? First work order, replace alternator, gives me the labor and the parts totals, shows tax, and there's my second work order. The store copy would show the warranty work because the customer's not going to pay for the warranty. So this, you can see down here that it went to a warranty account for $725, and we're going to get that back from the manufacturer. There again, the detail. So I mean, that's very customizable. One thing I will mention, if the customer does want to see like a no charge on the warranty and the part numbers, that's very easy to do too. One quick change.
Thank you, Steve. So kind of in summary, obviously we're talking about best practices. We're talking about what it takes in order to do good quotes and good billing. What we clearly also talked about was that messy middle, the things that really have to be done, the quickness, how efficient, and what that really requires. And the reason to do best practices we go back to is for us to make sure that we're focused on creating some sort of outcome that is that you can tie to value. And when we look at Equip IQ, when we look at any of our customers, we're always trying to look through the lens of how do we help customers be better, how do we help them push them to be great, and what role do we play? And we probably should open up for questions based upon the time. Sarah, are there any questions you found in the chat room?
Yes, we have a few here, so we'll go ahead and get to those. And just as a reminder, you can ask those in the chat or question box. So the first one we have says, why would you change the time and add time for a reward?
I guess I'll take that one. In my experience, we had a incentive plan for our technicians where if they were efficient on a job, what we consider to be a flat rate hour, we would reward them for that. And if they weren't efficient, we would deduct hours away from there. Now, just keep in mind, we're only affecting billable hours. We never affected actual payroll hours. So if they worked 50 hours during that week and we were able to bill out 70, they were a lot more efficient.
Okay, great.
Question.
Thanks. Okay, the next one. What if I am not in a position to make changes at my company?
Yeah, that makes sense, right? And not everybody's in a position because of maybe the title or maybe that their ability to to influence change. But I think everybody needs to remind themselves you can't do it alone. No one really can, right? So, but the best way to approach something like that is from a business benefit standpoint. So when we talk about having that outcome, as what the reality is, it's pretty hard to argue when you're starting to talk about bottom line type of decisions. So if there's real savings to be made, then you'll ultimately get the attention of those who are willing to let that change happen. That'd be my recommendation, is focus on the business, on the value.
Okay, great. Okay, what if my company does things differently than what you have kind of shown today?
How is that possible? How can anybody be different from the way we do it? Just kidding. Clearly, software, I personally think this is one of the biggest barriers to this entire software industry, is that people have truly lost their imagination, and they don't have the ability to do anything other than the way the software does it. And that's one of the things that I've really, come to love and be so passionate about, is that, software needs to adapt to the business processes and allow for change. And clearly not all software allows for that. EquipIQ does. I think it's time that more people ask questions like that and expect more from their system. Good question.
Okay. The next one, how can you change the time spent on a service work order without changing the actual time spent on the service work order?
Steve,
yeah, I think I'll take that one. Yeah, I'll take that. I guess I did show it. I moved awful quick. I'd love to spend more time on it. Usually when I do a service demo, and Chris can attest to this, is I like to spend a lot of time. So, but really what we're doing, we only allow, when you do any kind of adjustment on a work order for labor time, to only adjust the billable time. We don't allow you to just change actual time. That's what I talked about, the integrity of the time punch. A time punch is a time punch. We want to keep that. But if you want to bill the customer more or less, that's the flexibility we give you. If we move it to another work order, we're not changing the time punch. We're taking the actual and the billable along with it. So, it's very, very auditable.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, it says we're forced to use the system we have in place today. Can you use part of your system to fill in the holes?
I would answer that. It depends, right? It depends on what it is you're referring to. Today, I think a lot of people don't have a solution that really covers everything, because there's a lot of software packages out there don't have the capability of that. Clearly, EquipIQ is different because it really does have the ability to do all of your business. It is that enterprise-grade solution. So whether it be from CRM all the way down to your financials, and everything in between, whether it be mobility, whether it be reporting, all those kind of things, they are in one spot. So I would say it depends. And if you're looking maybe just for a rental solution, we'd have to understand. If you're looking just for financials, we'd have to also have another conversation. So much of what we do is tied together, but it's worth reviewing.
Okay, and then the last one we have, unless someone gets another one in here real quick. Do you do custom demos on site?
Absolutely, yeah. As Steve was kind of alluding to, he loves to go into more detail, right, because there's so much in here. So we actually prefer that model, right, to actually do a custom demo where we get to have a focus for an hour or two without any distractions, and you can stop and you can ask us questions when you need to, when you need context, or we move through a screen too fast like we do in a webinar like now, like today. But you have the opportunity to say, hey, I didn't understand that. Can you explain that further? So that's actually our preferred model anyway.
Okay, great. Well, we have gone over just a couple of minutes, but we really appreciate everyone being on here today. And we're actually going to have a survey pop up right after this is over. It'll take you 30 seconds and just help us improve, what we're trying to show you. So if you don't mind just doing that for us, that's really helpful. And then we've recorded this webinar. I will send that out so that if you want to share this with anyone, you can do that really easily, and that will come out in the next couple of days. You'll get an email with that link to it. And Chris, I'll give you the last word if you want to say anything else.
Yeah, no, thank you for taking an hour with us. We do have another webinar coming up in the 7th of September where we're going to talk a little bit more about the units in terms of the attributes and kind of maintaining and managing those, what that might look like. So we look forward to those who have interest in attending with that. So with that, thanks everybody, and have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.